Yeah. All right.
Okay, I'll be with you in a second. I'm just going to Facebook here. Got it. And then I will record. Okay.
Got it.
Ready to go. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Grant Cameron, and for all those people that live in the here and now, you're welcome as well. Thank you for taking time from your valuable schedule to listen to me. I have a very special guest, Terry Tibando, who I just found out lives in the same place where my son is living, and I may be moving to Port Coquitlam, BC, and that's where Terry is. And so Terry and I are going to talk a little bit about his research and his long career. He's been in probably 20 years longer than I have been, and I've been in it since before Jesus was a carpenter. So he's been in a long time. And we're both going to be on a cruise that will be going from Seattle to Alaska in September of this year. And you can see the little background behind me there. This the contact is contact@sea.com for anybody that wants. And you can put Terry's name, my name in there. And there's going to be a whole pile of speakers. We maybe reference some of the speakers are going to be on there. But it's an idea of having a contact experience at sea, C5 events. I'm planning to run an event with experiencers in the morning where people can come and tell their story in confidence in a room where there's no cameras and no audio and stuff like that. But today Terry is joining me, and we're going to talk a little bit about what Terry's going to be talking about on the cruise and the background of what he does, and why the topic of UFOs is important enough for you to get on a cruise and enjoy a trip to Alaska, as well as the entertainment of listening to a bunch of experts on the UFO phenomena. So welcome, Terry. Thank you for joining me today, and let's get started.
Thanks, Cameron. Grant, I should say. Yeah, so I'm excited about this. It's like a 2-in-1 package for anybody that's going to participate on this cruise. Beautiful BC coast and Alaskan coast with many stops along the way. And a voyage, I hope, where we get great weather. I've known of people who have gone on this, including my brother and his wife, and they say that it's a beautiful cruise. And then for those who want to partake of the UFO and paranormal presentations, this is going to be an extra bonus for everybody.
Yeah. Have you been on a cruise before?
I have. When I was about 8 years old, and I went across the Atlantic by boat.
There you go. That's kind of a
I was sicker than a dog.
the one that we're going on has got, I think, 5,000 people on it, and it's got like every entertainment thing you can think of, the latest entertainment, and it's one of the newer ships. And I told her the cruise lines I was on, she said this one's way better. Cruise line. So, and the stuff, I think the lectures are happening when we're at sea, so it's not going to interfere. Like they have a bunch of tours in Alaska that they're going to do with the whale watching and stuff like that, that people can go on. So the lectures aren't going to take place when that is going on. It's going to be at tea time. So I think afternoons or something like that. And so you're presenting and I'm presenting, and I think it'll be some of the other people I can sort of mention. Steve Bassett is now going to be on there, and Richard Doty, the famous intelligence guy from AFOSI, is going to be there. And let me think, who are some of the pardon me?
Seth Shostak, Jimmy Church, Marjorie Kay, a few others that I haven't yet met, but we'll.
Yeah, Daryl Stims, the expert on implants, alien implants, is going to be on the ship.
Right.
I'll be interviewing him. So it's an exciting lineup, and you've been to conferences, I've been to conferences, and you know that when you get to conferences, it's not so much the lectures, it's the fact that you're talking to people, and apparently we have our own tables. So the people that are attending the lecture will sit with the speakers, and there's a section in the dining room where we get to sit. So you get to sit with the speakers, And if you want to ask Richard Doty what happened back in the 1980s, and does he actually, did he actually get referenced by Richard Helms, the former CIA director, that said, believe everything Richard Doty says about UFOs? He can tell you that story. He can tell you all sorts of stories, about his briefing of UFOs where he was told this is all for real. So that's the opportunity you get at a conference. This is a smaller conference.
Yeah,
So you're going to get the opportunity to meet with people who are speaking and ask them questions as well as listen to their lecture.
exactly. I mean, I've heard stories about Richard Doty, how he went around with a suitcase of money and would pay off people to get on board with a certain parameter of thinking. And I know I listened to a video with him being interviewed by Dr. Stephen Greer, and it was pretty insightful. But I mean, I kind of knew that this was going on, but to hear it from somebody who was actually a part of that is amazing stuff.
Yeah,
Really
and
amazing.
there's actually there may be a film crew coming out of Vancouver that is in contact with Richard Doty. So there's a project they want to look at this aspect. The movie is going to be called the documentary is going to be called The Aviary, although it may be turn out into a bigger project. But that's this idea that there are high level intelligence people who are retired who meet with each other, and they've got these bird names, and they exchange material and stuff like that. So this is what this movie is on, is to look at all these characters in the shadows that have been around. And you and I know who they are. Kit Green and Ron Pandolfi and Richard Doty and all these names you hear all the time. And this film guy wants to look into, is this real? Who are these guys? Are any of these stories true? And so it's going to be an exciting time. I think it'll be well worth the 7-day cruise to get, because you're in a conference room, whether it's at, we were in Ohio last year, and you've got the hotel, and you may walk down to McDonald's or something, but you don't have all the other entertainment. This, you have the UFO research, and then you've got all this other entertainment, and it's like even like you said, like your wife is really not into UFOs, which is basically the standard practice that our friends and relatives really don't get into it. And that's why you have these experiencer meetings, so you can meet with other people who are having experiences. So if you
Exactly.
have a partner that's on the ship, they can do whatever they want while this UFO stuff is going on, and you can still go on the tours off ship together. And it's whereas if your wife comes to you to a UFO conference, a MUFON conference, she's stuck. I mean, she
Yeah.
she
And,
can't go
and
anywhere.
people are not going to be bored on this trip. I
Yeah.
guarantee that. This is an amazing cruise. I've been letting people know, my contacts and friends and relatives, and just about anybody who wants to listen. I make sure I remove my tin foil hat so they don't think I'm too weird. But yeah, this is going to be really exciting. I'm looking forward to networking with some of these other people. I definitely want to speak to Seth Shostak, because I take in astronomy, and I know that he has a perception of what he thinks may happen or will happen, and when we do make ET contact. And the problem that I find here is that science will follow the scientific method, that things have to be provable, have to have be reproducible, etc., in order for science to start to take a serious look at it.
Yeah.
However, when you've got millions, tens of millions of people around the planet who have had UFO sightings and ET contact, these are the people you want to be talking to, because they give you some insights. And the problem that we have in the UFO field is we put so much reliance on what we call officialdom, that they represent the government, they represent the military, they represent the intelligence, or they're an astronaut or a scientist. And we think, oh yeah, these people, they're smart, they know, they're going to give us the information that we're looking for. And what often happens is they have an agenda of their own that may not be the same as the public's agenda. We want disclosure, and yet they will say, well, we can give you some disclosure, but we're not going to give you all of the disclosure. In other words, we're going to hold back on it. Why? Because there's probably some invested interest that they have, some agenda that they're following. Perhaps if you're military, you don't want to share what you know because the other militaries of the world will probably find out. But guess what? They probably already know. And so who are you keeping the secret from? You know, it's really from the public. And the public aren't necessarily blabbing away. It's usually the insiders of these established official organizations.
Yeah.
So when we understand it in that perspective, the ones that have loose lips are the ones sinking the ships, and they're the insiders of these various established organizations or officialdoms.
Yeah, yeah. They have the thing I always look at is, you know, the idea that the Russians may have 80% of the answer, and if you put your cards on the table, you may give them the 20% they need. And that's all that fear thing. And you got a $900 billion defense budget. You're not about to give it up and just sort of hand it over. Same as the analogy I now use is, and you're in Vancouver, so you know about this. I mean, Vancouver, the average house is $2 million. And then you walk downtown Vancouver and there's people living in cardboard boxes on the street.
Exactly.
And so you've got the people with the power and the people without the power. And I know we talked to Dr. Eric Walker back in the 1980s, and he said, why should we change the rules and regulations to satisfy your curiosity? You're just curious. You're never going to get the answer, so give it up. And he basically told us, it's like, go back to your cardboard box. We control this thing, and we're not about to give it up. And it's almost like, you know, when you can pry it out of our dead, cold hands, you can get it. But
yeah,
we've got the power, and they're not about, or scientists. If you got scientific people who are trying to get patents, if you've got biological material from a being, that's worth some money. I mean, in terms of understanding how biology works and stuff like that, or you got a piece of metal that gives you some way to process stuff, and you start to learn stuff. I mean, that's where you're going to file a patent, and this could be worth, you know, millions and millions of dollars to these scientists. So you're not going to give it up either.
That's exactly right. And the problem here is that they're looking at what's in it for them, the technology, the power, the control that comes from it. And in many ways, like Richard Dolan says, we have a breakaway society or civilization on this planet. If we're a type 3/4 of a type of civilization, which means we haven't yet utilized all the power that this planet can give us, whether that comes from 0-point energy, whether it's the tapping of geothermal energy, or whether it's solar energy, water energy from the oceans, etc. We haven't yet fully tapped into that. But the breakaway civilization have become a type 1, which means they understand the basic concepts of the quantum flux of space, which is that 0-point or ether that we sometimes refer to, that is being utilized in not only flying craft that look like saucers or disc shape or triangles and cigar shapes. And they probably do have a black space program where they're being able to leave this planet whenever they want to, go to the moon, perhaps to Mars, maybe even beyond the solar system. And I feel that if this is what's going on, then you and I and everybody else on this planet are just not part of that civilization. And this is something that I know that Dr. Greer talks about all the time, is that we have the ability right now, if we can release these types of technology, we can clear up a lot of our environmental damage, control the climate a lot better to what's going on right now, because we're slowly killing the planet. It's planeticide. And the problem here is there's only just so many years left where things become so irreversible that we may see massive extinction going on. I take a very social, spiritual aspect or viewpoint on this whole UFO phenomenon, and part of that is in my presentation. I present a quote that comes from the Baha'i faith that mentions that know thou that every fixed star has its planets, and every planet hath its creatures whose number no man can compute. So what that's basically saying is that if we have a stable star, which we do, the sun, we have planets in our solar system, there's going to be life on those planets, even the moons or satellites. Now, we don't know what that life form may look like. We may be the only intelligent life form in our solar system, but that doesn't exclude other life forms, whether that be microbes, or whether it's plant life, or whether it's sea life, or land life, or whatever it is. It will develop based on the conditions and environment of that planet. So and this is something I start off in my presentation, is that, and why I want to speak to Seth Shostak on this, is that the concept of the habitable zone, zone of habitability, or what they call the Goldilocks zone of habitability in our solar system, is based on the fact of this Earth, water, air, various landforms, etc., and with the right distance from the sun. The reality, though, is that life comes from the sun. Without it, planets are just cold bodies in space, if they've even developed. So the thing is that when we start to change our perspective of what is going to be conducive to life, then it puts an emphasis in something else rather than on ourselves. This is what I call a medieval anthropocentric type of thinking, even in astronomy. We should have moved past that a long time ago. We're still thinking of ourselves as the center of the universe, and we're not. And so when we go looking for TRAPPIST 123E, whatever, an Earth-like type planet, well, yeah, there's bound to be planets that have an Earth-like environment, but that's not the only type of condition that we need to have for life. So essentially, life is wherever you find it. It's throughout the universe, and the universe is infinite. Therefore, we can't even calculate the life that's going to be encountered when we do encounter it. And when we do encounter it, we may not even recognize it, or they may not even recognize us as an intelligent species. So, that's just from a purely scientific astronomical perspective. And then I get further into my presentation, which is the recent disclosure by David Grusch, and I compare that with the disclosure by the Disclosure Witness 2.0 event that Dr. Greer presented. He had 10 military witnesses, scientists, etc. And so there was more disclosure there than there was with what David Grusch gave at the House of, I forget what is it, House Committee on
Intelligence? Maybe?
Intelligence, yeah.
Senate Intelligence, I think it was, yeah.
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 Let
me ask you a question just to roll back, because we're talking about Stephen Greer, and on the ship they're going to do a CE5 with Gen 3 glasses. I'm not sure how you do that on a ship, because you're not allowed to point these glasses at any light, and a ship is lit up like a Christmas tree. So I don't know how they're going to do this.
Yeah.
But explain who Dr. Greer is, and then explain what a CE5 is. They're going to do this at night on the ship. So explain what this is all about.
Yeah, that was one of the things I was going to do, and now I had to sort of think, oh, maybe this is going to be tentative, because I was going to bring laser, I was going to bring a magnetometer, a ghetto blaster for sound, all the rest of it. But if you've got noise going on around you and you got lights on the ship, and the magnetometer may be picking up extraneous electromagnetic interference coming from the ship, then the devices that I have that would help me to utilize the various modalities of contact would not be very effective. So I may have to scrap all of that, and because it would probably have to be done on the top deck. Now, Dr. Greer has done similar things where, the CE5, who he is one of the major researchers in this, and the other one that I know of is Sicto Pass Wells down in Brazil, who's done this.
And explain what it is. Explain what a CE5 is.
Well, yeah, a close encounter of the fifth kind, a CE5, is when it is human initiated. In other words, we don't rely on UFOs flying in the area and then we rush out to go and take a look. We invite them to come into our location. So there's a number of protocols that we follow, and basically this is fairly flexible and generic across the planet. And the way it works is that you go into a state of high meditation with a group of people, usually in a circle, and you try to elevate your consciousness beyond your location so that it expands outward from the Earth to the solar system, to the galaxy and beyond. What you do at that point is that you allow your consciousness to just free flow and expand, and to be receptive to any information that may come your way, whether that is finding or seeing an extraterrestrial craft, a civilization, an ET being, and you invite that being or craft to come to Earth. At that point, because you are remote viewing, you go into a state of coherent thought sequencing, which is to show where your location is, right from the outside of the galaxy through the arm, one of the arms of the galaxy, to the solar system, to the third planet, whether it's on Earth, whether it's night or day. And usually because we do it in the evening, it will be night. So it may be on the West Coast, for instance. The city is all lit up, and we give precise locations. In the place that I do it, just close to Port Coquitlam, is a large park. So I show them the park and how many people are there. It's very precise so that when they come, if they come, they know the location. Now, the sound that we use is usually beeps and tones that are either come from an ET craft or from a crop circle. So there have been recordings of these, and some have been synthesized so that they're somewhat musical, but essentially they're like beep, 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 and it could be beep, 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 whatever. So the point of this is it's something of theirs that we're broadcasting back through the speakers using a walkie-talkie to broadcast so that they will pick up on that. The lasers that we use are to pinpoint our location. Now, if you know anything about science, when you shoot a laser, you see a beam of light. But when you're a couple hundred miles out in space, orbiting the Earth, what you're going to see is a flickering of colored light. Maybe it's blue or green or perhaps some other color, but that's what they would see. But what we try to do is make circles or triangles to indicate where we are. So you got three things working for us: meditation, sound, and light. That's part of the CE5. If the ETs are able to, if it's safe for them and it's appropriate, they will start to interact. And we've had that on numerous occasions where there may be a craft that goes over, there may be several. That will indicate that they're in the vicinity. They may do what they call a flash or a power up. That again is something that's unique to ET craft. And they will sometimes land. Now, the thing is, when they land, you're not going to see a physical ship descending. Usually they're in a transdimensional state. And this is the thing that's important to know, because I believe that was Arthur C. Clarke who said any alien technology would appear like magic to us. Well, that's what we're finding out. We're not necessarily seeing physical beings running around and, you know, like on the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind. And there's a reason for that, because, you know, we just went through a global pandemic, and that global pandemic affected the whole planet. It affected millions of people. Many millions did die from it. And that was a virus that came perhaps from bats. It got into the human people and through moving around from one country to another, we spread the disease. Now imagine an extraterrestrial being coming down in the physical form, physical flesh, and starts to interact, starts touching you. That's going to be cross-contamination of a virus we have nothing or known anything about. And we're also spreading our diseases to them. So when people say I had physical contact, I said, well, how do you deal with the medical cross-contamination of viruses and bacteria? Oh, well, they kind of dealt it up. They knew what they were doing. In other words, it's a very pat answer, but they haven't given you any information. They're assuming that they're so intelligent, they dealt it up. Now, that's not to say they couldn't do that, but I would say that if you're going to have contact, the safest method is a interdimensional or transdimensional presence where you may see them as a hologram. And they can come up and physically touch you, but you can't touch them. It's a one-way street. And that's done for their protection and for ours. So that's just some of the things that you can anticipate. And when that craft lands and they're engaging with you, that means that craft could have landed on top of you and you won't know that you're inside the craft at that moment. And that's the interesting thing about this whole CE5 experience. Now, I've also will try and introduce 2 other new CE close encounter types of categorization or classification. CE6, which is you have to be an astronaut to experience it. It's outside of the Earth. You're either orbiting the Earth or you're going to the moon, or perhaps one day you're going to the planet and you're engaging with either ET craft or ET beings. And there is precedence for that. I know of a situation that did occur where a science officer in NASA witnessed this on board one of the space shuttles. And I have a suspicion of who that astronaut or astronauts who engaged with that ET. And this ET apparently was very, very tall, about 9 feet tall. A CE7 is something that any one of us can do, which is it's really a springboard from the CE5. And what it is that you have a remote view of a particular event. And it's probably shared with at least a couple of other people who have the same sort of information. This is what they call subjective information that you've acquired through remote viewing, and you share that with the group. And when you share that with the group, if several people are sharing the same information, there's probably a valid piece of information. However, what makes this rather unique is that if an event unfolds based on the information, in other words, a physical event unfolds, then that becomes classified as a CE7. And that also has been reproduced and is authentic. So those are the 2 new classifications. As far as I know, no one has yet classified those or quoted what a CE6 or CE7 is. That's something that I developed back in 2009. So that's what Close Encounters is all about.
And you've got a related group to Greer's group in Vancouver. And can you talk about a little bit about that? And if you had any bizarre experiences in terms of...
Yeah, we have. Most of the time, whenever we go out, we don't always guarantee to people, look, ETs are going to interact with us. That depends on them, if it's safe and appropriate for them to do so. And when we do have these events, we may have flashes of light around us, near the ground, around the group. We can get changes in temperature, ambient temperature. So if we're on a cool night and suddenly all of a sudden we all start to feel warm, that is also an indication that ETs are there. It's not the wind blowing through. There could be the sensation of other presence within the group, either around it or going through the group. Unusual odors and fragrances not associated with the environment. Sometimes it will be floral, could be like musky leather, it could be something entirely different. We've had ETs come up and start touching us. So for instance, they may touch you on your hands like this or your face. Very gentle, almost like it's insects. And yet, when you're out, say, in February, there are no insects out at this time. So what's going on? And it isn't one person experiencing that. It's several people in the group. I have had a situation down in Rio Rico at one of Dr. Greer's events where an ET came up and poked me in the forehead. And I looked around and there's nobody there except the next person's 10 feet away. They couldn't got up, poked me in the head and sat back down that quick. And that was a deliberate, to say, we're here. And
people ask the question, like they ask it about God. Why doesn't God get off his fat rear end and come and tell us what's going on? And they ask the thing about the aliens. Why don't the aliens just land and tell us what's going on? What's your explanation for that?
Yeah. We're going through a period in our evolution on this planet where we are becoming more conscious and aware of things in the environment, things in the universe, things about each other. And in some ways, people say, well, we're raising in density or frequency. And you can use those terms if you want to. I take a more moralistic, spiritual aspect to this, perception to this. And that is, we are becoming more spiritually in tune with everything. And this is a way, if you believe in a divine creator God, and I do, that God is interacting with human beings in a very subtle manner. And I think God is very subtle in everything that he does. There's no big lightning bolts that come out and zap somebody because they're being a bad person. The days of those, what they call a grand miracle performances of a pillar of fire and the parting of the seas are no longer required to get the information across to a human being. We're relatively intelligent and we're astute to those kinds of things. But there are still people out there who say, no, I believe in science, and as far as I'm concerned, God is a myth, it is a delusion, etc., etc. And that's fine. That's their belief system, and I'm not going to knock it. I will say this, though, and that is, science and religion are really one and the same knowledge. They come from the same fountainhead of knowledge. Science is discovery and invention, whereas religion is revelation and inspiration. So when you are investigating science and you're looking at something that is based on facts and evidence, and you make a theory and the theory proves to be right, that's a source of knowledge. When you are when you receive information on a spiritual nature, whether you have an epiphany, as it were, or something, that's inspiration. However, revelation is when God sends a messenger who's what we call a manifestation of God or a prophet. He's giving direct information as if he were God. In other words, God speaking through that person, much like being programmed as a robot. In other words, his will is being pushed aside and the will of God is there. Now, the thing is, that's a big leap in understanding both spiritually and scientifically. But the thing is that if all of creation is from one divine being, and this is where I have some differences with the ancient alien theorists who say, well, we have things in Sumeria where we have people with wings on them and a big hoop around them. That must be somebody from another planet because it looks like, they're flying. And no, what that really represents is something spiritual. In fact, if you were to talk to the Zoroastrians who believe in this feathered being, That's one of their representations or icons for Zoroaster. No different than if you showed a cross, that would represent Christianity and Christ. And all religions have those symbols. It's just a way of identifying who they are. But I tell people it isn't about the person, but what they're saying. And that's the spiritual aspect of all of this. And so God does this in certain ways. So when we look at ETs, why don't they land on the Washington lawns, White House? Why don't they land on Parliament in that area, etc.? Because, maybe in the past when they had events, say in 1952, where UFOs flew over the White House, and there's photographs of that, they sent out aircraft, jets, to try and figure out what it was and chase them around, and they just took off. I've seen this. I've seen jets chase after UFOs that we were interacting with down in Crestone, Colorado. And I've seen this on several occasions, not this one. One was very personal because I was communicating with a group of UFO craft with a high-powered floodlight, and they were responding back. And then I saw this jet come over and fire something down into the group of UFOs on the ground, and all the lights went out just like that, instantly. Wow. And the moment that happened, another, what I call a fast walker, came from the San Padre Mountains, flew right underneath that jet and over to the San de Cristo Mountains, crossed 60 miles in less than, well, I would say 2 seconds, and it looked like the jet just froze in the air. That's how fast it went across. I was watching this with binoculars. And then as the UFO got to the other side, the jet continued on. And then when the jet continued on, all the lights on the ground came back up again.
Wow.
Now that's pretty startling.
Yeah.
And you can't tell me the U.S. Air Force or the military are not interested in this. They don't know what it is. They know what it is. They've always known since at least World War II.
And you think your lecture on the ship is a bit about technology. Do you believe that the technology to shoot these things down? And if so, like the question I always wonder is, if we've got this super advanced technology, why are we lobbing shells back and forth in the Ukraine? I mean, it's almost like Civil War technology that we're using.
You never reveal what you got, because once you start to reveal that, the other side may decide to up their ante. It's like a poker game, right? Okay. And so, if I remember when they said that the Russians were dabbling in psychic phenomena, and the U.S. said, "Oh, we better play catch up on this." We don't know too much about it. Boldface lie. They know about it. The fact that we found out about it may have been a slip on the Russian side, or maybe it was deliberate to see how we would respond to it. It's like when they were testing all the nuclear devices and having literally thousands of atomic devices set off in the American Southwest and the Pacific and other places. And then Russia comes out with the mega bomb or bomb, whatever, and it's more powerful than all the other detonations that have been exploded at that time. But the reality is, America has detonated more nuclear devices than any of the other countries combined. That's the reality. And when you take a satellite photograph of the American Southwest in the areas that they've been testing these, you see all these craters all over the place. That's the detonation points, the ground zero. So the thing is that also really explains why there was Roswell, why Roswell was overflown by ET craft, and why they were shot down, because the kids in the galactic neighborhood, namely humans, had found the matches to the nuclear fireworks.
Yeah.
And that sent up ripples of concern, not only concern, but also through the various dimensions, because that's energy, and that energy is being released. And we think of ourselves as just living in a physical universe, but in fact, there's much more around us, but we don't see it. We only have a certain perception of what reality is, at least in this physical existence that we have. It's often said that we are spiritual beings living in a temporary physical life. That's the reality. What that means, therefore, is we're infinite. We're an infinite creation, and we're intimately connected to the divine. It's been said we're really just spirits or reflections of what the divine is. There's only one soul in the universe, and it's not you and I. You know, it's the great unknown being, right? So, I mean, this is where religion gets into all of that. And I touched a little bit on it because I don't want to overwhelm people with that type of topic, because it's a whole new subject matter. But I bring it up at the beginning and I bring it up at the end, and how we need to become unified on this planet. And before we can have galactic unity, we must establish global unity. And we're not yet there. We have to follow certain guidelines and moralities and certain scientific principles and maybe some politics and all the rest of it. But I bring up at least 12 points that are essential for unity based on some of the Baha'i writings. I mean, all my research, I've looked at Hinduism, Buddhism, Islam, Judaism, Christianity, the Baha'i faith, and some of the indigenous. And all of these are religions that are followed by probably 95% of the people on this planet. You can't deny that belief and say there's nothing to it, because then we've got 95% of our public living in a delusionary state of existence. So when we put this all into a certain framework, then by following some of these tenets, like knowing that there's only one creator, that there's only one human species, we're it, even though we have different shades of color and culture and temperament and all of that, that men and women have to be in harmony, that science and religion should be in harmony, that there's a need for global solution to the economic problems that we have. And usually it will be a spiritual solution, not necessarily a physical, although it will influence the physical. A divine civilization is one that is properly tempered by both the spiritual and the physical, the technical and the moralistic attitudes that people have. When that's in proper balance, society progresses, and it will progress in leaps and bounds. And so I kind of bring that up a little bit in the discussion. But I also bring up the very technical aspects of what did the Germans do during the Second War? How did they get hold of this technology? Why did they start building flying saucers? And there are some very good photographs out there that people will say, well, we think that this is just, you lost the war, so let's just kind of paint the picture a little bit differently from what reality is, that this is what we could have done if we did it. And the Americans say, and some of the other countries would say, no, it never happened. It's disinformation. There's nothing to it. However, Foo Fighters were definitely a reality because we had pilots who saw them and interacted with them. But some of the information that I have says, no, they built a number of different types of craft, both militaristically and through various private organizations or corporations, some of them well known to us, such as Henkel, BMW, SEG, some of these other ones. And then I talk about some of the scientists that worked on some of the programs and how the U.S. captured after the war, through Operation Paperclip, 1,600 German soldiers or Nazi scientists, and how with that came a lot of technology. Now, the interesting thing is there have been programs on TV that discuss the monument men who went around retrieving gold and art forms and other things that were stolen during the war. What they do not talk about is the T-Force. The T-Force was the technology force. And interestingly enough, Ian Fleming, who wrote the James Bond novels, was a part of that T-Force.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and the other interesting thing is that Canadians were forces were part of the capture and understanding of nuclear development that Germany was doing. This is why we have some of the best nuclear reactors in the world, the CANDU. And but during that time, they went after whatever documents, whatever scientists, whatever hardware, like the V2 missiles and the V1s, the jets. They also captured various discs as well. And the interesting thing about this is that because a lot of this ended up in the States, some of it did trickle into Canada. And I believe my father may have seen one of these saucer craft in near Moulton, Ontario.
Wow.
And he back in 1952, 51 or 52, I think it was one of those years, 51 or 52. He went back from Victoria, where we were living, to see his parents in Toronto. And he went by military jet, and it landed at Moulton Air Force Base, which is now Pearson Air Force, Pearson International.
Yeah.
And when he got off the plane, as he was stepping down, he saw a hangar, and the hangar opened up, and there was a saucer in there. And it came out onto the tarmac, and then suddenly went straight up into the air, hovered there for I don't know how long, came back down and went back into the hangar. Now, he swore up to his dying days that that's what he saw. I came across a little drawing of what he made, which was basically an elliptical outline of the saucer. When I delved into the German designs, the one that came closest to it was what they call the Baril Yaga, which was a one-man craft, and it was a vertical takeoff and landing craft, and it has that ellipse shape, and I show this on some of my slides. And now I do a PowerPoint slide presentation, and I show all the various craft. And the interesting thing is that when the Americans captured a lot of this technology, George Adamski said that he met up with a Venusian who landed on a craft, and he described and photographed the craft, and it looked like a Hanabu 2, a German craft. So what I think they did was there's a learning curve. The Americans, because the Germans leapt ahead so far ahead that they had to understand how were they able to accomplish the propulsion, because there wasn't the same kind of combustion engine powering these craft. This was something completely different. And when they talked to Herman Oberth, he said that we can't take all the credit for this, that we had help from other worlds. Now, that explains a lot. Mm-hmm. When we understand that, and when we understand the fact that the Americans had a learning curve because they didn't understand what they were doing, that they were able to fly some of these craft around. And at that point, they were already thinking about creating a psychological deception on the public using these craft. So these craft would have people who would come out tall, blonde, blue-eyed, the Nordics, as we would call them. And they would say, we're from Venus, And interestingly enough, George Gadamsky did say they seem to speak with a German accent. You know, which is funny because my daughter dated a German fellow who was a tall, blonde, Aryan-looking individual. And but anyways, long story short, I have a document that says that the CIA said that there's a potential for psychological deception with this. And I think that's what they did. And they started doing this back in the 50s, which is the same time that I had my ET encounter. So I had a very personal relationship with this phenomenon. As did
what year was this?
Well, my father, who's in the Royal Canadian Air Force, had this sighting. And then when we went and we were transferred from Victoria to North Bay, we lived there for about a year, and then we went to St. Jean's, Quebec.
Okay.
When we went to St. Jean's, Quebec, we lived on a very small air base on military housing. And my mother and I went out one day for a walk around November, and it was very cold. We dressed up for it, and we were pushing my baby brother in a carriage, and we walk along the road where there's some military buildings, and I looked up and I saw what I thought was a Mexican sombrero hat flying in the sky. And I said to my mother, "What's that?" And she said, "Well, I don't know. It's probably an airplane." And then it took off. So I just assumed, okay, airplanes got wings and they look like hats, flying hats. Within a couple of days of that sighting, I had ETs come into my bedroom. Wow. They found me. I didn't have to go looking for them.
Yeah.
And it scared the bejesus out of me because I thought they were ghosts, like Casper the Ghost, or they were like little men. And I called out to my mother, and she came in and said, "What's going on?" I said, "There's little men behind the door. And, you know, I think they're ghosts or men or something." And she looks, and there's nothing there. So she calms me back down. She says, "I think you're just having a bad dream. That's all it is. Get some sleep." She goes, damn if they don't show up again. And they're coming right through the walls. This is why I thought they were ghosts. And now I'm in a full panic. My brother, my twin brother, sleeps in a bed beside me, and then the youngest one was in his baby crib, and they didn't see anything. But I woke up the whole house with this carrying on. And my mother comes in, and she's a bit upset and annoyed with me. And she's saying, "Now, what's going on?" And I said, "They're back. Take another look." And she looks, and there's nothing there. And I'm thinking, "Well, damn, I know what I'm seeing." And she said, "Look, you're having a nightmare." And she said, "I want you to think about Christmas because it's not too far away, and think about the Christmas tree and the presents. You know, what mothers usually do is to simmer your kids down with something positive."
Yeah.
Great for her. So, you know, and I kind of say, okay, well, maybe that's what it is, and maybe I am dreaming. And she calms me down, and she goes back in. "No more carrying on now. Get some sleep." So I'm looking at the wall, and there's nothing there. And I think, I must be dreaming. Boom, they're back again. This time they're walking around the bottom of the bed up to where I'm sleeping. So I pull the covers over my head, thinking if I can't see them, they can't see me. Therefore, they're not there, right? I mean, the logic of a 5-year-old. So the next morning, I fell asleep, but there was something in the back of my mind that said the covers came off me. But I have no memory other than that. Next morning, I'm being teased by my brother and saying, "You just had a nightmare, you know, nothing." And that's what my parents were saying. So I kind of dismissed it. But the funny thing is, I was drawing pictures of rockets and stars and planets and things. There was something that I was trying to get out, right? So did that mean I had an off-planet experience? I don't know. And I've never been hypnotized, and I don't think it would be worthwhile because I think based on the 70 years of experiences of seeing things and encountering things, too much confabulation, you know. And so I may be adding things that perhaps weren't there. But that was my personal experience with it. Now, was that genuine ET as opposed to perhaps a clone biological life form, a programmed life form? I don't know. But that was 1953, and it wasn't until the mid-50s that the US had a major breakthrough in electrogravitics and anti-gravity, which means they probably understood what the Germans were doing and could reproduce it, which also brings up the interesting point of the shoot down policy instituted by the military, that if they saw things flying around, feel free to shoot it down, because they wanted to know what was the technology based on what Earth technology was at that time.
Yeah.
Now, the thing is that if the Germans did this all first, it's because there was a crash landing in the Bavarian Black Forest in 1936, I think it was. Italy had one in 1923, far earlier than anybody even realized. And they started to reverse engineer this stuff too. The one that happened in Bavaria, in Germany, the military went out and retrieved it. When they went out to gather up what was there, there was also live ETs. And therefore, these ETs helped the German Reich to develop to where it did, whether willingly or unwillingly. That's what I think happened, because we know that the concentration camps and the imprisonment of Jewish people and the fact that they were used for labor and for experiments, etc., etc. I think there was a priority given to find out not only how to build these things, but the Jewish prisoners were expendable, even if they died in the process. And when the British and the Canadians got some of this technology, and by the way, what I forgot to mention was that my brother and I, we actually had the opportunity to play with a Messerschmitt 163E Comet rocket plane as kids.
Wow.
This is before America had the X-1, the X-2, the X-46, and whatever they want to call it, you know, and we're already opening up the canopy, getting in there and playing with the joystick, right? Wow. So we're having a great time, and unbeknownst to anybody that we were doing this. And we spent a half an hour playing with this aircraft. And the interesting thing is that it has a tiny little propeller on the front, nose end, big tail, swept back wings, no back rudders or tail wings, and a nozzle on the back end, which is the rocket exhaust. And this thing was only what, 26 feet long at the, you know, and this was in St. Jean's, Quebec, on the tarmac.
Wow.
So I looked at this and I realized, like, how would they get that aircraft into the country? There's a river that runs right by the airbase. They must have got it down the St. Lawrence, put it on a barge, and put it and sent it up to the nearest military base.
Wow.
And that's how we got to know about. So if we had that technology in Canada, what else did we have?
Yeah,
which also brings up Dr. Heinrich Richard Methe, who was a German Nazi scientist who was believed to have been in Canada and may have helped with the Aero projects.
Okay.
You know, so there's a lot of, like, there are loose ends here, but one can make the argument that this is what was happening in Canada, but a lot of the scientists, including Dr. Methe, ended up going down into the American Southwest to connect up with everybody else down there. Schellberger, von Braun, and Hermann Oberth, and all these other scientists that were there. You know, the interesting thing is that von Braun protege was Dr. Carol Rosen, who I met. And, so that's what 2 degrees of separation from
Yeah.
a scientist. I've met people like Daniel Fry, who was a contactee back
Oh, is that right? Wow.
in the 1960s. And I saw his pictures and listened to his talk. He was in Victoria. So, I
Okay.
mean, I've had opportunities thrown my way. And I think what it was it was to get me to become more aware of what else is going on. These are like a little, I don't know what you call it, synchronicities or privileges
Yeah.
or whatever you want to call it, but they seem to have fallen into my lap. So I've tried to make some common sense out of it.
Do you believe you have a mission? Do you believe you came here to do something?
No. I'm not that egotistical. I have a philosophy. Whatever I know, I'm going to share. It's free.
That's what I do.
Knowledge is free. Let's just get it out there. Let's enlighten everybody. There will be people who will receive it open-heartedly. Others will just put up a barrier. Others will tell you to keep your mouth shut and all the rest of it. And I'm not going to be intimidated. I have an understanding of what I think the afterlife is about, and I feel that I will experience it at some point. I mean, I'm 75, be 76 this year, and I'm not afraid of death. I know that those who I have known in my community, who I would call friends, have passed away. And I see at some point that I will connect up with them again.
Yeah.
I'm a spiritual creature, not a physical creature. I'm only living this life temporarily.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So let's go back to the cruise as we conclude here. You're giving one lecture or two? Are you giving a workshop and a lecture?
I'm not giving a workshop, but if I do, it will be the CE5. What I will do is this is a freebie, and I will basically run people through meditation, how to remote view with a few remote view practice sessions. And then basically I would try and do that in the afternoon. And in the evening, as it gets dark, is to get everybody who wants to do this on top of the top deck to do it. Or they can do it from their own stateroom, the deck staterooms. But it's better if you do it in a group, because then you're sharing the information, you're listening to the meditations and doing it as a unified, synchronized group. But that will depend on what the circumstances are of the ship. In other words, if I use a magnetometer and the magnetometer is going to start beeping on me when there's nothing around, that piece of equipment is going to be useless.
Yeah.
If they're not going to allow a laser being pointed around in the sky, that will also cut down on my ability. So we're losing at least a couple of modalities. The only thing going for us then will be the mental high consciousness meditative approach, which is the basis of this whole aspect, because the Germans did that. And they did it with Maria Orsic and her Virile Society of Women who had long hair, and that was all part and parcel of it. And they were channelers and meditators, and they were picking up information. Well, that's what CE5 does. We're trying to pick up information. So it's come full circle.
Wow. So that's September the 6th through the 13th. Sailing out of Seattle, and we welcome everybody to join us there and go through these different methods. A lot of CE5, a lot of contact. That's why I call it contact at sea. They wanted sort of a contact environment. And if you're running out of the Vancouver area, have you got a group there? And how do people contact you if they want to?
Yeah. I have on Facebook. I have CSETI Vancouver. There's two. One is just a regular Facebook. The other one is a private group, but either one will give you the same information. I posted contact at sea information there, and they can reach me at Terry Tibando, at Tibando, Terry Tibando at gmail.com for any information, or they can phone my cell number, which is 604-916-7384. And they can ask inquiries, and I'll try my best to answer them. But I encourage people to go to the CSETI Facebook, CSETI Vancouver, and look through that information. You're going to see information there not only about contact at the sea, but a lot of other information. One of my talks that I am going to probably do at some point is the life that I have found on Mars and in our solar system. And there is life. In fact, I found 2 living species, and I've named them after myself based on scientific data. So
you might want to slip some of that in your lecture in Seattle.
yeah,
because now they want to know about it.
Yeah, I would give that to Showstack and say, here it is. You know.
And you've written some books. Talk about your books.
Yeah, I've written 6 voluminous textbooks on. It's called A Citizen's Disclosure on ET. Let me say that again. A Citizen's Disclosure on UFOs and ETI. And these are textbooks similar to a university textbook. They're massive. The first volume is 840 pages, and most of the other 5 volumes are similar in shape. This was written as one book of 3,600 pages, and I had to break it up. I don't use conjecture. I don't use wild theorizing. I don't use speculation or hyperbole. I give facts. If I can't find good sources of information, and there have to be at least 3 or 4 on one particular topic, I don't use it. If I find good ones, I include it in there. That could come from books, from the internet, and from videography. There's video links is there as well. Newspapers, magazines, people I've talked to, etc., etc. And I've had some close connections with certain people. One was a general in, I think he was a colonel in North Bay. He was in charge of the underground complex of for NORAD. There was the Sage site, which was connected to Cheyenne Mountain. That's just a sideline. But these books are probably everything you ever wanted to know about the subject. I don't try and twist your arm to get you to believe in what I believe in, but I lead you down the path, and you have to assess what you are reading or seeing. And these books are literally filled with hundreds of colored photographs. They're expensive. They're not your regular book that is 200 or 300 pages. These things are massive, and the reason for the expense is because of those colored pictures, which are throughout the whole thing. It's like having a university textbook.
Wow.
And when I approached the universities here, Simon Fraser and UBC, they said, well, that's interesting. We have only about a week or 2 in our astronomy classes on this, and that's all we do, life in the universe. And they said, we don't have anybody that can teach it. And I said, I could teach it, because I know the subject. So, but they said, well, no thanks at this time, but, see what happens.
They got to grow. So you said you don't speculate. So let me ask my last question and get you to speculate. Disclosure is a big topic. Where do you think we're going with it?
It is coming out, and whether it's coming out through the efforts of all of us, like yourself and Stephen Bassett. I was just communicating with Stephen before I talked to you this afternoon, and he gave me some information. But with disclosure, The military are not going to reveal what they know. That's just, we're going to have to wrap our heads around that, because something major would have to land on these people and shake them to the very core to release that information. They're giving it on bits and pieces and drabs and what have you, because they think that that's the best way to serve up this information. But listen, you and I are just common folk, and we already have some great insights of our own from this. We don't have all the information, but we have enough to put it together to make sense out of it. And I've been fortunate enough to have been born into a military family, and to see military crafts throughout my childhood, and to have ET and UFO sightings and experiences. So where I think this is going to go is somebody has got to say, let's look at the information that we got from the public, because it's global. Let's not ignore that, because when we can organize that, and this is where I think the UFO database has to be overhauled. There is major flaws within it. And having programs that are like docu-entertainment, such as Ancient Aliens, is not really helping, because they bring up certain aspects, but then they don't seem to do the investigation enough to go down and say, well, wait a minute, we're dealing with something that's been traditionally religious or spiritual, and now we're twisting it around and saying, what if this was extraterrestrial? I'm not saying that ETs didn't visit us in the past. I think they did, but not in the manner that we think they have. You know, it's like saying the ETs built the pyramids and all the great monuments that we've ever developed. And I'm saying, hey, wait a minute. You're not giving any credit to human beings. We're pretty intelligent and we're pretty creative in what we have to do. So let's acknowledge that. The fact is that, yes, we need to listen to science. We need to look at the facts and figures and trust those numbers. But when there's some area of doubt, we can also look at the spiritual end of it and say, well, what did they say about this, if they say anything? You know, I know that Islam talks about planets and life on other planets. The Baha'i faith speaks very specifically about that topic, and there are many quotes. A lot of religions don't speak about it. They speak about the universe. So disclosure for me is going to be a bit of a slow process. It's going to be like pulling teeth. And we have to stop playing the military game and start playing our game. And our game is truth and disclosure, no hiding of information. Get it out there to the public. We're at a point right now that unless we turn around and do things differently, we're going to end up destroying this planet. And some will say, well, if we came from Mars and we screwed up that planet, we're screwing up this one too, right? And so we've got to put an end to that nonsense. If the trillions of dollars that are spent on military warfare were spent on methods of trying to solve problems rather than through force and weapons, we would get further ahead. In fact, if we put women into a lot more power than they have right now, this will be a different world. I guarantee it. Guarantee it.
Exactly.
And that means we have to start listening to our wives, our girlfriends, our women who are speaking up, and support them. We got a country like Iran that's suppressing them. That's idiotic. And a lot of countries, whether they like to believe it or not, suppress their women in one way or another. So
women are more into family and into unity, and the men is
exactly.
you know, urinating contests and me and ego and stuff like that. Individual, whereas
I don't have time for that. I mean, I'm involved in trying to find ways to bring about unity. I work with a lot of Persians. I work with people within my community, and basically, it's just being acknowledging of the other person that I'm talking to, and saying we're all one. We share the same values and all the rest of it. The only thing we don't want is war. End it. Put an end to it right now. You know, so that's how I'm seeing disclosure. And the ETs are essentially here observing us. they can't, I believe that there's a non-interference clause in the universe. That's a divine law. I
Yeah.
think the only thing they can do is subtly influence. That's it. They can't
Yeah.
come down and start solving our problems. We have to solve our problems.
Yeah, I agree with you. Thank you very much for what you do. And if I move out there, I haven't made a 100% decision yet. How often does your group meet in Port Coquitlam? Because that's where I'm going.
It depends on the weather. Now, the weather is starting to get warm here. And so normally I have done this in February in cold weather. I've done this sometimes around March, April, but this, if I'm doing something, this will probably happen in May. And I try to do it at least throughout the spring and summer months, sometimes the fall months. It all depends on the weather. Vancouver gets a lot of overcast. That's the problem. Even though there's what they call a global CE5 event happening, Vancouver will have to wait for another day when it's clear.
Yeah.
I want people to have a good experience, not a crappy one.
Well, I'm looking forward to maybe attending one of your sessions.
And you're more than welcome anytime.
And thank you very much for the work you've done over many years. And we will catch you in September, and we'll discuss what's going to happen there on the cruise. And hopefully a number of people can come and join us and sit there and talk UFOs and disclosure and spirituality and stuff like that for a whole week, where you walk off and you're sort of just floating and
you're flying really off a ship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for doing this interview, and we'll get it out there, and we'll see where it goes. It's like another drop in the ocean. We'll just keep going until it all gets revealed.
Yes. And as I say, personally, you're welcome to give me a holler anytime. And if you're moving down here, we'll get together for sure.
Yeah, beautiful. Okay, thanks for doing this, and we will
welcome.
catch you shortly, and we'll stay more in contact between now and September when the cruise takes place.
Excellent. Thanks, Grant.
Okay.
Take care, my friend.
Okay.
So, was there anything